Bear Down Bears fans, another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast coming your way. Pat the designer, Courtney Cronin in the building here at Hallis, fresh off of the portion of practice that we get to partake in, which is a lot of stretching and slow running and different things like that. But getting to hear from Eric Washington, getting to hear from Shane Waldron today, and of course, previewing this game is what's on the agenda today. I mean, we got, you said it just before we started recording. Eric Washington came out fiery today. Did. So very exciting to hear from the coaches and kind of get his perspective, especially on what could happen. I think that he's one of the most pivotal coaches to take from today because we may get Jaden, we may get Marcus Mariota, but it doesn't seem like that's going to change the game plan too much.
No, and the thing is, like, you have two dual-threat quarterbacks, like two different sorts of dual-threat quarterbacks. One who's a veteran who doesn't have the same running style as Jaden Daniels, doesn't factor into the run game nearly as much, but he looked pretty good when he went in. It had been 68 days since he had taken a snap for Washington, and he goes in and, you know, throws 2 touchdowns, and they're able to walk away with a 40-burger on Carolina. Yes, it's Carolina.
I was going to say, is that credit Marcus or credit Carolina?
Still, I mean, it was a really impressive non-drop-off performance in a tenuous situation where it's like, all right, you lose your quarterback because he's got a rib injury. Now you don't know if your quarterback's going to play. But I'll say this about Eric Washington. Like, he left nothing up for debate about how seriously they're taking this matchup and what they're viewing it as. It's a measuring stick sort of game. This allows them to go up against an elite offense for the first time this season. Now, some people will say, well, Houston might have an elite offense. Didn't look like that in week 2.
Yeah.
This is their chance to show where do we stack up in the NFC and against some of the best competition.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, the one thing that doesn't change, of course, the quarterback position changed, but how Cliff Kingsbury has called plays has been really good, especially for Jaden Daniels. I'm assuming that he can do similar things for a Marcus Mariota, quarterbacks that you kind of look at and say, okay, maybe they're not here just yet as far as the processing, but I'm going to make things so easy for them. They don't have to be here. I can make you a good quarterback here because of how I'm going to set this offense up. And I think that's why, right, when I heard, you know, heading into this game, that this is still a measuring stick for them. I thought that was very important because you would think now it's not completely sure if Jaden's going to play or not. They're going to try and push him out there Friday and see if he's able to go more of a walkthrough. But when you hear the starting quarterback's not out there, a lot of times you go, okay, well, you should win if the starting quarterback's not out there. That's not how the Bears are treating this. They still are treating this that this is a 5-2 team, a team that has overcome a lot of the doubt that they had coming into the season. And not only that, they have been able to stay in games with teams that we think could be Super Bowl caliber teams, like what we saw versus Baltimore. Now, were they a little bit behind? Yeah, but still able to keep the offense going in that situation.
They've also, like, I know that the Bears get a lot of criticism for the 3-game win streak. It's like, well, who did you beat? You beat a bad Rams team, a bad Panthers team, and a bad Jacksonville team. They have wins over Cincinnati, not a good team. Yeah. The New York Giants, not a good team. The Carolina Panthers, common opponent there. Certainly the Arizona Cardinals as well.
Not a good team.
I feel like you need to keep that same energy when you're taking a look at Washington, but the reason that I think it's so important for Chicago going into this is because this is a high-powered offense. So number 1 in scoring, tied with Baltimore, 31.3 points per game, 4th in yards, top 3 rushing offense, and the only real area defensively that you can poke at right now is still that run defense. Yeah. They're giving up some big plays, and you've got Brian Robinson who's averaging 4.7 yards a carry. That's no small feat for this team. So I look at the opportunity ahead of them to know you have a 12-game streak where you've allowed 21 points or fewer. Now, I feel like that probably goes out the window this week, despite whoever's playing at quarterback. Certainly, if it's Jaden Daniels, I mean, they're scoring.
They've been able to score, yeah.
But like that doesn't mean that you necessarily chalk that up as, wow, they're a better team. I mean, the Bears are favored in this game right now because of the quarterback uncertainty. It's a matter of how do you adjust to what the offensive adjustments are going to be inevitably if Marcus Mariota has to play. Like, I've talked to several players about what they saw from the time that Jaden Daniels goes down against the Carolina Panthers to what happened when Marcus Mariota came in. They said they didn't see that many differences with what they were doing schematically. But regardless of that, they still do really things that are really tough on a defense. The amount of no huddle that they run, the amount of plays that they can run out of the same personnel groupings, that's really difficult for a defense when you can't substitute. and are trying to be able to adjust on the fly, you're really hoping for Chicago that the experience factor here is something that they can lean on when they're dealing with that. And, fact of the matter is they go up against their no huddle every single day in practice. And that is something the Bears have done consistently on a more consistent basis since week 4.
Yeah, I mean, the Bears, I believe, right now in the NFL are top 10. Now Washington's top 5 in percentage of times that they run no huddle. But I thought what was a big takeaway as well, you mentioned the run game in there. I asked Eric Washington, if there's anything that could be called a chink in his defense's armor, it would be that. And what he said was basically, I would ask you to look at last week.
Sure.
And a team that, listen, I give them credit for
yards,
that.
yeah.
They were a team that it seemed to get the running game going. Trevor Lawrence is still Trevor Lawrence, so that a lot of drop footballs as well for Gabe Davis. Yeah. But that was a team that was running the football solid. They did a okay job again running the football last week versus the Patriots, but versus that Bears defense, they weren't able to run the football. It sounds like Eric Washington is saying, we've gotten that part figured out. It was more of a where guys were on the field in those moments, where guys were in their run block, where they were supposed to be on their assignments and different things like that. Like, that was more of the problem than a personnel issue, and that won't be a problem going forward.
Yeah, and I remember we talked about this after the Rams game, where you can look at the stat sheet and say, wow, Kyron Williams had nearly 5 yards a carry. Yeah. Well, how did that play out at the end when they were able to, to hold and to prevent a team from mounting a late game comeback? Yeah. I think that's the numbers for themselves right now. The Bears are middle of the pack in terms of run defense. Yeah. That's okay. Like, it's not
19th in run EPA per play.
Yeah,
right now.
Everywhere else they are right now is top 10. Like, is in the top 10, and in a lot of different categories. Red zone defense, third down defense are in the top 5. So they're comfortable. Like, if there's one thing that's gotta, I guess if one thing that you can live with, it's you might be giving up some of those bigger plays, but on the other end of that, are you able to come through in critical areas and those critical gotta have it situations? The answer for them is yes. Yeah. But you'd obviously like to see Brian Robinson not run all over this defense if you're Eric Washington, which is why I think he looks at this as such a stiff test to be like, all right, this is what, if we're going to be a playoff team this year, if they're going to go somehow get through this gauntlet of an NFC North and be one of the teams that represents the NFC North in the playoffs, this is the competition you're probably going to face. Yeah. So this caliber of competition, how do you stack up against it in week 8? Because by the time, that could determine a lot of things. It could determine if they feel that they need to do anything at the trade deadline. It could determine any sort of changes that they make, schematically speaking, over the course of the next 11 games. This is a good time to have this sort of game, because whether you play Jaden Daniels or not, you still have a very talented offense that's been scoring at will on people. Yeah. And to know how you can combat that and how you can at least attempt to slow it down, if not, obviously the goal is to stop it, but you have to be realistic about it. Like, no team has really been able to fully stop them. There hasn't been many games where they've scored, under 21 points. That's something that I think has to come into account for the Bears as they size up where they stack after this game and based on what happens on Sunday.
I thought what was interesting coming into this game was what we heard Montez Sweat say after as well, right? Of course, Eric Washington talks about it, and he goes into great detail about, what the Commanders do really well offensively that you're going to have to worry about. But I thought it was very telling when you heard Montez, talk about Jaden and talk about how he likes to go right. And, when he wants to, if the read's not there, he has to make, he can use his legs to get out of there. That to me is telling, because it's confirming everything that we're seeing. It's confirming what the numbers are saying. That's what they're telling them in the building, that, hey, listen, if he plays, we are going to get this right side locked down. Defensively, we know he wants to go right. He's going to have to beat us somewhere else. And I think that's why, to me, right, when I look at this game, I don't know how much I put – this for me was bigger for the offense than for the defense, I'll say.
The Bears offense.
The Bears offense.
All right.
This was a bigger game for me for the offense than the defense, because when you see the matchup, the Terry McLaurin matchup, Terry McLaurin has not had a good game versus Jalen Johnson yet in his career. Now, it helps when Sam Howell's throwing the football, makes it a little bit easier to take it away. But he hasn't had a good game yet. I don't know if that changes in this, because Jalen Johnson is probably the best cover cornerback in the NFL right now. I don't know if the offensive line that is a little bit banged up there in Washington is going to be able to slow down Montez Jervon and Andrew Billings, who have been top defensive linemen as far as pressuring quarterbacks. Like, This, to me, is another business as usual game for the defense, no matter who it is. When you hear them talk about how, yes, Jaden Daniels can put up the points, but we know where he wants to go.
I mean, I actually see it differently. I feel like it's a bigger game. Like, let's say Jaden Daniels doesn't play.
Right.
And, I mean, it looks like that's the way it's going to trend.
Right.
I would imagine. So he was DNP on Wednesday and Thursday. I would imagine tomorrow he will be limited.
Yeah.
Like, if there's any semblance of him being able to go that's, like, living in reality, I would imagine that he'll do that and they'll list him as questionable. So we'll have the whole song and dance of the weekend. How is it going to work out? They're preparing for 2 quarterbacks. Like, it makes the Bears' job more difficult if they're able to do that.
Yeah.
So Washington's hoping that they're going to be able to get Jaden Daniels out there. But either way, like, the reason I think it's a bigger test for the Bears' defense, and we've seen them like dominate in games before. And of course, like, you want to see the offense continue on this flow. That word has been thrown out a lot the last couple of days of how are they in this groove right now? Things are flowing. They're in a right rhythm. They're getting the ball to their skill. They're running the ball effectively. I get all of that. But defensively, they've not seen they haven't had a test like this yet. And it's not to say that anything was easy for them. I mean, look at their first drive, Jacksonville's first drive where they end up holding in the red zone. They still marched down the field, like 65 plus yards to get down there. They haven't had that real test of, all right, let's see somebody that sizes up with as good as we are defensively on the offensive side of the ball. And for them to then get into, before they start getting into the bulk of their division schedule, where you've got Green Bay in week 11 and then, Minnesota, Detroit, like so on and so forth, this is a good test to say, okay, are we really a top 5 defense or do we just I feel like the offense gets more criticism of they just beat a bad team and they put up 35 points on a bad team. What about the defense? The defense is playing these bad offenses. Yeah. I think you need one of those games to be able to, to show outright, you can handle some of the best in the NFL.
Do you still get that, though, if Jaden doesn't play? And I think that, right, to me, of course, you know that they can, and Eric Wash just said as much, they're running very similar things. It's not changing a ton. And Terry McLaurin's still down there. Marcus Mariota can throw the football.
And the run game is going to be what they rely on. I mean, Mariota, for as experienced as he is in his NFL career, he's been in the league since 2015. He's been a backup the last couple of years. I'm really impressed by what you saw. Granted, it was against the Carolina Panthers, but to come in after nearly 70 days of not taking a snap in a game, dating back to the preseason, and to operate it that efficiently. Lean on the run game. Lean on Brian Robinson. This offense, the common misconception that people have about Cliff Kingsbury's offense being the air raid is that you're just spreading it, 4 wide. And
he's using the run well.
Yeah, really well. Yeah. And it's helped the rookie quarterback. If we talk about the Offensive Rookie of the Year award and why Jaden Daniels is the favorite for it, it's because he's in a great system that's, manipulating defense's weaknesses, but also putting him in position to succeed. Now, Marcus Mariota has been in different offenses before, and I think that this one, certainly from a limited sample size that we saw, suited his strengths well. But it is going to naturally look different and feel different for this Bears defense if they're preparing for Jaden versus preparing for Marcus. I understand they're dual threat quarterbacks, but they're not the same. Yeah, and that's I don't think that Marcus Mariota has the same contributions to the run game by any stretch than a Jaden Daniels does.
No, and it's Mariota's mobile. He can get out there, and he's to me, he is the perfect backup for what you have in a Cliff Kingsbury system.
Sure.
He's the guy that can come in. He knows the calls. He knows what he needs to do. He can make enough of the plays to hurt you if Brian Robinson gets himself going. And I think that's why, I asked Eric Washington a question about the Bears' run defense, because if this run defense is what we saw in London, that makes this team very one-dimensional. I think that's how you can put this offense away in a different light. Now, if Jaden's out there, that's very different, right? Mm-hmm. Jaden's speed is different than Marcus Mariota's. Jaden's arm is different than Marcus Mariota's. He can hit Terry McLaurin on deeper routes than Mariota will be able to, and that will make things a lot more difficult. And that's why I like how Eric Washington talked about, it's not just the matchup of Jalen Johnson versus Terry McLaurin. It's, we got to make sure people are over the top. You got to make sure if it's Elijah Hicks back there, he knows where he's supposed to be. And we've seen a lot of that, especially from that London game, where they seem confident in going into this game if they have to utilize the backups and the backups that the Bears have as well.
Certainly. I mean, the way that Eric Washington talked about Elijah Hicks and just how prepared he was for that moment, but like the level of execution, like it's hard to replace Jaquan Brisker. Like you're not going to find somebody that can do exactly the things that he does. I mean, there's a reason that he was a second round pick. There's a reason that they value him as much as they do on this defense. But you've got a really good crop of backups who prepare as starters. That sounds so cliche, but truly, when you talk to Josh Blackwell and you talk to Elijah Hicks about how they view this role, I mean, there's no drop off.
Yeah.
And that's why we said from the very onset of this season that the secondary was the deepest unit on this team. And the depth is proving you that. And, you mentioned some of the injuries. It doesn't feel like Jaquan Brisker is going to be passed in concussion protocol
I would assume
this
that.
week. So that's Elijah Hicks. Did not see Kyler Gordon out there for another. I mean, we saw him, but he wasn't doing anything at practice. So that's probably Josh Blackwell again.
Probably.
So you have two backups playing in place of starters. Like, if that's Marcus Mariota, like even if it's the drop off from Jaden Daniels to Marcus Mariota, it's still a veteran quarterback who knows how to pick apart, like knows where he's going to target guys, or at least like seeing the weakness of a defense. That's why I feel like it's such a stiff test for Chicago, no matter what, because of that experience factor that's going to put your secondary to the test.
If the Bears come out of this game with a win, if they come out of this game with a loss, what is the storyline for each, you think?
So for the win, it's NFC North. Get ready, like buckle up. Like my God,
You think it still has that level of cachet even if Jaden doesn't play?
I really do.
Okay.
I feel because this is the part of the schedule that you have to take advantage of of who you're playing, because when you get into week 11, you're facing 3 defenses 6 times that all rank inside the top 10 in EPA per play. Like it's not going to be easy, like by any means. And I know how good Caleb has been playing against the blitz. Like you're still facing Brian Flores twice. That would freak me out. If I was,
that's not a normal blitz either. It's just like, did you blitz 10 of 11 guys in a real NFL game?
It's just like you have to get these wins where you can. So if you're 5-2, and you think about some of the 5-2 teams out there right now, like going into this week, the Baltimore Ravens, the Washington Commanders, like the Green Bay Packers, there's a lot of really good teams that you're going to be fighting for playoff positioning. So this to me, if we're talking about like the win and what it would mean in storylines, first off, is Caleb Williams, like, is that offense coming out of the bye looking as good as they did against Jacksonville? That's the story. Yeah. If they end up coming out with a win. And what that sets you up for playoff positioning before you go play Arizona, who, it's a beatable team. You play the New England Patriots, a beatable team.
Very beatable.
So you could be, 7-2 going into your bulk of your
I expect them to be.
Schedule?
If you win this game, I expect you to be 7-2.
And
at worst,
that's where it's going to go. And so if they lose, I think the question will be, the jury's still out on, can you beat good teams? Can you beat, because then, of course, I feel like everything's viewed in the context of the division itself.
Right.
So if they lose this game, and if the defense does its job but still gives up more than 21 points, the streak ends, I don't think that's going to sound alarms. But was it a byproduct of the offense regressing? Yeah. That's where the conversation will go. But if they, you got to take advantage of this part of the schedule. Like, to me, that is what the next 3 weeks are about, as the Bears try to get in position in a division where everybody's got a positive point differential, everybody's got a winning record. It's not going to be easy. Like, this is the time of year where you absolutely have to take advantage of who's in front of you, no matter whether the quarterback is playing or not. And so far we know it. The line keeps changing. Doesn't sound like Vegas is very confident in Jaden Daniels playing. The Bears have to prepare as if he is, but realistically, it becomes a different test if he's not in there.
See, I don't disagree with you on the losing storyline, but my question would be, haven't we answered that? Because realistically speaking, you're talking about a really good coaching staff with Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury over there, making it work with players who, yes, they're good players, but it's not the starters out there, right? Especially when you look at this defense. No Jonathan Allen now. Still got Deron Payne out there, but Jonathan Allen's the guy where I'm sitting there looking at my center going, you may die this week. Like, I need you to stand in there and block this guy. And not to say the backups aren't good and they still can't get after you, but didn't we answer questions like that against the Rams? Well-coached team, really good run game, still had really good players out there. Yes, you didn't have Cooper Kupp. You didn't have Puka Nacua. That makes a difference. But you still had an elite coaching staff that is a championship coaching staff that you were able to not only, in my mind, Flus outcoached in a lot of ways in that game, but also that you were able to dominate when it got down to crunch time.
Well, that's part of it, but players play the game.
Yeah.
So it's like if you don't have strength on strength, do you really know enough about yourself just yet? That's why I thought Eric Washington, when he comes out and says this week the challenge is going to be extreme this week, like he's right.
He comes out every week. He comes out in a press conference. I'm just like, what do you got for me, Eric? Bring the fire. I know you got it.
It's a good summation of like where they are right now and how they have to view this going into week 8 to know where do we stack up, because we think we know right now coming out of the bye. We think that this is a team that is going somewhere. A win here is like confirmation for that, because Washington very well could win the NFC East.
Yeah. That is the thing that I do wonder, and why I would have loved to see Jaden in this game, because this is a team that you're going to be competing with. Probably if you're going through the NFC North, I don't expect the Bears to win. Can the Bears be a third-place team, though? This is a win you need for one of two reasons in my mind. One, and I talked about this with Shea Monday. We were talking about how this is a must-win game. One, you're fighting with Washington for, unless they win the division, for the 7th seed.
Yeah.
Now, if they win the division, this is very different. But you're fighting with them for the 7th seed to get into the playoffs more than likely. And on the flip side of that, all the defenses that they face, your defense can give them the blueprint. This is a copycat league.
Yeah.
If Jaden Daniels plays and you go, we need to make sure that we put pressure more on the right side, this is going to shut him down. He's going to have to go to the left side. He's not as comfortable over there. He's not figuring that out yet. And there's no Terry McLaurin over there for a second option. You got the Steelers. They still have the Eagles twice on this schedule. They still have Atlanta on this schedule. They have some defenses that can get after you. I think that's how you then set them up for the future to say, we also made your life even harder because now other teams know how to play you.
Yeah, and you're right with the whole idea of it being a copycat league and how many common opponents they have. Like, I mean, they have Arizona, like how they just beat Arizona.
Yeah.
The Bears are going to be looking at that to figure out, okay, going against Kyler Murray, and we know that, there's enough out there, but like your opponent that you're about to play now just gave you a plan on how to do that. And, there's a lot to like about the way that Washington's playing football that I think the Bears can emulate in a lot of ways. Maybe not offensively. I mean, it's the big misnomer that like, okay, just because Jaden Daniels is on a team that's 5-2, it means he's in a better situation. No, he's just being asked to do things differently as a quarterback there. It's not a single read offense, but he is going to his first read more times than not. Things are simplified there versus what Caleb Williams has been asked to do of going through his progressions in a pro-style attack that, finally once it got the run game going has opened things up. But there still are similarities to like the overall product that you're putting out there of a team that you are going to very well, if it all goes according to plan and they both get into the playoffs, you very well could see again. Yeah,
no, 100%. And I think I love the way you broke it down as far as, they're being asked to do different things. It's, again, why you want to see the Jaden Caleb matchup, because to me, the relationship between Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels has been as good, if not on par, with any quarterback wide receiver, or if not better, than most quarterback wide receiver relationships in the NFL. I wonder how Jaden adjusts if you are able to take that away from him this season. The other thing for me, though, is seeing the difference on not just on paper, but actually in person. Because when you look at Caleb, when he goes to Cole Kmet's bringing the football in at a 90% clip on the season. The connection
90% of his targets.
The connection that they have right now. When you look at how Caleb is spreading the football around, just seeing the difference in it. And it's not to say, and this is the point I want people to get, they can both be good guys.
Yeah.
They can both be good quarterbacks. It's so, you should have took this guy, you should have took that guy. And I know Caleb says, we're just worried about the win. We're not. Caleb knows the story.
Yeah, of course.
Caleb knows he's the number 2, home. I'm the number 1.
And he's going home.
Yes, he's going back to Washington. Come on now. So for me, I think that this is a huge game in my mind for Caleb Williams to silence a lot of the conversation around who should have been the number 1 pick. I think for Caleb Williams, it's going back home and showing, yeah, y'all got a nice quarterback, but he's not me. Let me remind y'all who I am. And I think that he is wired in that way where whatever you want to call it, Mamba mentality, Jordan rule, however you want to think about it, like he's got a little bit of that to him, and we've seen that early on.
And there's, with this matchup, I mean, we don't see this that often.
Yeah.
Since the start of the common draft era, so it's like 1967, we have seen number 1 versus number 2 as rookies overall, go against each other 5 times. This would be the 6th time in history.
Yeah.
I hope we don't get robbed of it, but it's a good chance to, I think a measuring stick game for Caleb and for Jaden Daniels if he plays first and foremost. How do I stack up in a head-to-head, side-by-side matchup with the guy who was drafted behind me? And that's what I remember asking Ryan Poles about this in London. How do you view it? Where you've got your quarterback and the success that he's having now on a 3-game win streak, the offense is looking to put up 30-plus points. He's the catalyst of that. 30-plus points in 3 straight games. They've had that happen one time. Yeah. One other time is 2020 in the last 10 years. That's a big part of his growth, and that's something that he's responsible for. How do you, evaluate him? But also, you're a human. You have eyes. You can tell that Jaden Daniels is doing big things in Washington right now. And he said he wants Caleb to run his own race, and it makes sense. They're not sizing up how Caleb's doing versus Jaden Daniels, but it's natural to be well, there's somebody else that if we wanted to, we could have had.
Yeah.
He was doing really, really well. So there's that element, but it also goes as far as the offensive rookie of the year race. And of course, wins are more important than anything else, but this game could go a long way in determining who wins that award at the end of the day. Jaden's got a head start because Caleb started a little bit behind the 8 ball and had 3 bumpy weeks to where there's no margin for error anymore. There's no 100-yard passing game for Caleb Williams that's going to end up winning him that award. He's got to come out and be the guy who's throwing for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns consistently to be able to, further himself along in that race. Now, if you ask him, and nobody's asked him to my knowledge, he's going to say, no, that doesn't mean anything right now. It's the wins. But more times than not, somebody who wins that award is on a winning team. It's a byproduct of their record. You're not going to find too many quarterbacks. I mean, receivers, one thing, with Garrett Wilson winning it for the Jets a couple of years ago. For quarterbacks, if you're going to be winning that award, you've got to be on a team that's actually going somewhere. And that's where the Bears want to be.
Yeah, no, and it's where I think this is a win. And if we're going to say that, right, whatever the win story is versus the loss story, the win story is, wait a minute, this team may be able to go a little farther than we thought. In my mind, I think winning this, you move to 5-2. You're still fighting with the best of the best in the division. When you look at point differentials right now, it's changed a little bit because the Bears were on the bye week. But going into last week, the top 4 teams in point differential in the NFL were the NFC North. You're still putting yourself in that conversation. To me, it is. We're ready to keep up with the big boys, and I think it really affects kind of what Ryan Poles wants to do moving forward, whether he adds something to this team, whether he does take a big swing on a player for higher draft capital, or if he goes, okay, we're still not there yet, maybe we add a little bit to this team and see where we get to.
Yeah, I mean, with that being 2 weeks away and this game coming now, I know that it kind of feels like, well, the Bears could stand pat at the trade deadline and still feel comfortable with where they are, and I there's part of me that thinks that may be the case and what happens. And then, of course, the idea of them being sellers like we talked about the other day. But if you're thinking about from his seat, from Ryan Poles' seat, what could we possibly add that takes us over the top? A win is the only time that you're probably having that conversation.
Yes. I mean, honestly, conversation, and I know the teams that it is, but the conversation to me changes dramatically if you're 7-2 playing the Packers.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
I think literally you go, the pipe dreams that we're having right now, oh, do you go get Myles Garrett? Probably not, right? Why do we want Myles Garrett? We don't need him. What is he, 15 sacks a season? I'm not worried about it. Do you go get Max Crosby? Probably not, right? You're 7-2 and you got the Packers. You're starting to have conversations a little different going, wait a minute, how far can we really go? I know that this was an easier portion of our schedule, but we dominated it, which means we can keep pace in the portion we're coming up against, or we can add a dominant piece and then go through the NFC North and actually win maybe 1 or 2 more of those games. Because to me, whoever goes 4-2 wins. When I look at the NFC North, this division right now, the team that goes 4-2 in the division is the division winner because of how close everything is right now.
Yeah, and I mean, with the I don't want to say that you have to do everything to set yourself up for division play, but you kind of do.
Yeah.
With the way that the division is this year and how important those games are I mean, look at the margin for error that we saw in the Lions and the Vikings game. It's very thin.
Yeah.
And I think Cole Kmet said it on Monday when he was talking about, like, it's the talent gap that shrinks when you're playing these games.
Yeah.
When you see how talented they are, certainly, like, if you look at their receiving group, they probably have the best in the division. And on top of that, they've got, it's hard to say they have the best defense in the division when you can go over and look at Minnesota or even look at what Green Bay is doing. But God, like, the thought of having to make moves simply to keep yourselves competitive in a crowded NFC North, that may be like the path that they have to go in order to determine, like, is it worth it from a short-term and a long-term standpoint?
Yeah, and it's early, so it may be a little crazy to say you never know how injuries are going to play out, right? Or with anything.
You hope, if you do have one, that it happens before the trade deadline.
Absolutely. But it feels like right now your Super Bowl NFC representative is coming out of this division. Can you keep pace with a team like that?
Yeah.
And that's the gauntlet that you're coming up against as soon as you get to week 11. And that's why I think if you're 7-2 going into those conversations, you're not having, well, what offensive linemen are coming out of the draft conversations. You're having, how much can we win right now? Mm-hmm. And how that sets you up for the long term. Ryan Poles has proven he can adjust. So while you may lose something now, I don't know if he's completely out on some of the conversations we're having if he's 7-2.
Yeah, and does that change the conversations of people that you may hold on to?
Yeah.
I don't know. It just feels like with the trade candidates that they have, that they might actually be able to expend more certain players because you don't necessarily need that depth with the injury situation and guys that are coming off injured reserve, guys that will be back at some point soon, whether that's Larry Borum, whether that's Ryan Bates.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think that would change that part of the conversation, but, in terms of adding, if you're feeling really confident about we're going for it this year, a win like this cements that because you're going into a winnable game then on the road at Arizona and a winnable game at home against the New England Patriots. And so 7-2 could change things because you do, like, realistically, you need to win 3 more games to get in the playoffs at 10? Like, nobody's getting in probably at 9.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
But like 10?
You might need 11 to get in. You might need 11 to get in this division. But again, we'll see how it plays out. But I'm right there with you. I think that is whoever the player is, I'm not saying anybody specific, but whoever the player is, does he add 1 win? Mm-hmm. That's where you're at this season. Because if you get to 7-2, you're talking about 4 wins in a lot of divisional play.
Yeah.
Can you add 1 more win to that 4 wins? Or can you add, if you're sitting at 3, can you add 1 more win to get you to that 11th win of the season and put you in the playoffs? But just looking at this Commanders game, what are your thoughts? How do you think this game is going to play out?
It truly is hard not knowing who the quarterback is, but I feel like what we've seen from the Bears offense in the last couple of weeks, I think it's real.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's anything there that you'd be like, oh, that's just a fluke and you played a crappy team and you won. Same thing with Washington. I feel like they're for real because they've played some teams that would fall into that category, but their offense is as high-powered as it is. It can match up with just about anybody, and oftentimes for them it led to 5 wins. So I think the quarterback, like if Jaden Daniels is not going to play or not going to be at 100%, I think that certainly swings things in Chicago's favor. And it's weird, like all of a sudden the last couple of weeks, I'm now predicting scores that have potentially 3 in front of it to start out. I'm going to pick the Bears to win here. I think it'll be 31-28 Chicago. Going on the road and playing in a place like Washington where, the Bears have a lot to prove. You don't want to be in a situation where you feel like you have to play like you have something to prove. Just go out and be the team that you were against Jacksonville, the team that was in such control in the second half that was able to overcome a slow start to that game once again, a slow start defensively too, and then overcoming the interception in the back-to-back scoring drives. Like that to me is what's real about this group. So I think Caleb Williams in the offense will see another big game for Keenan Allen this week. Maybe it's the Roma Dunze game. Maybe, I mean, DJ Moore then again, like has been stellar.
I love the chuckle
Commanders.
when I was like, you got better than 230 and 3 touchdowns.
Oh my gosh,
he's like, I don't know, but I don't feel that way now. I'll let you know later in the week.
I mean, if they play him the way that they did last year and like just give him that cushion, and if they want to throw short passes to DJ and let him take it 60+ yards, then yeah. But that's the fun thing with this offense is figuring out who's going to be the breakout star on a week-to-week basis. And that's what happens when you do have that much talent, which is why I think now that they've figured out how to use it, like DeAndre Swift is the most important player, in my opinion, skill-wise, like for determining can this thing continue on.
Yeah.
So like if that's the case and he does, then who's eating this week?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, 3 straight weeks of 30+ points. I never thought that I'd say that with a Chicago offense, but it does feel like that is where this thing is trending.
I'm there with you.
8.
I'm only thing I'm different on is I'm probably the highest person on this Bears defense in our circle of ESPN. Because I truly believe the only thing that has held this defense back in certain games has been the offense not being up to speed and then having to carry a little bit of an extra load. I'm going to say 31-21.
Okay, you think they still their streak's alive? 21 points or fewer for 13 straight games.
I think the streak is alive just because, and I know that I was listening to Shay and Jay Hood this morning, and they were like, and Dion, and they're like, Pat's losing his mind out here. He thinks the Bears are just blowing teams out left and right. But I look at the matchups and I'm saying, but the Bears have so many advantages on this defense. If Tyreek Stevenson comes back, who are you going to pick on? Right, like, okay, like I normally would say, right, I'm going to pick on Josh Blackwell because maybe Terry McLaurin's covered up. Tyreek Stevenson's back. He's been the guy you're going to pick on. He is legitimately better than the opposite receiver coming into this game. This is the first game I think we can say that. Jalen Johnson, give me the matchup there on Terry McLaurin. If the run defense is real, like how Eric Washington has said, that means you're making your team very one-dimensional. You're going to have to throw the football. That's advantage Bears because they're intercepting the football at a rate that seems unbelievable. When I look at the Bears as far as forcing fumbles this season and recovering them, I think they're recovering 75% of their fumbles this year.
Yeah, they have 6. What is it? 6 fumble recovery.
6 forced fumbles, and they've recovered 4 of them, something like that. Like it's an astronomical rate. How they're playing feels very 2018 like, where we kept going every week. Well, you can't sustain this. You can't, and then we get to the end of the season. Like, I guess they can sustain this. That was ridiculous. Yeah. Like that's how it feels right now. And so to me, I think because of that. And because of what we know about how Cliff Kingsbury runs this offense, give me advantage Bears on the defensive side. And you look at the offensive side, I agree with you. I think the offense is real. And I think this, not to say Washington's defense is terrible, but they're just too banged up to me right now. When you don't get the pressure on Caleb Williams, you've seen what he can do when he has time in the pocket. Not having Jonathan Allen means there's going to be, if anything, at least a little bit more time for him to assess what's going to happen. I think that's advantage Bears as well. I think with the wide receiver group, it's going to make that DB room a little bit tougher for Washington. And I think that you can still go out there and score a ton of points versus this team. I think they're 25th in points allowed this season. Like, they're put up points.
5 in some big categories on defense.
And I think that gets exposed this week as well. I don't think that anything slows down. I guess the only question mark would be, is there a lull or is there a drop-off after a bye week? But it doesn't feel like it right now, and we'll see when we get to the game.
And offensively, like what they can really prove, and I know this is we've buried the lead on this. How about you get off to a fast start?
That'd be nice.
Don't let another team score first, because all of the changes that were like talked about on the broadcast and going into the London week about, they're scripting plays, and then we kind of hear, all right, well, they've had openers, but they've like put them in a different order. They put them in an order, and players got to see that and practice stuff. They still, script or not, it was not good against Jacksonville the way they started a game. Like, this could be a big statement of, do you come out fast and do you score on your first drive?
Yeah. My biggest takeaway, literally at the start of Jacksonville, I was like, they said they started scripting. Go back to the other thing. I don't want the script anymore. I don't like the script.
It wasn't. I mean, whatever it was, it wasn't effective.
Literally, I think it was literally play 16. Normally, you script 10 or 15 plays. I think play 16 was the first play that was like, oh, that's a nice play. That broke big. No, just stick with that. If he doesn't need a script, he doesn't need a script. Everybody doesn't have to fit square peg into round hole. Like whatever it takes. I think so. You've got Bears win. I've got Bears win. Let us know if you have a Bears dub in the comments below. I think this is going to be a fun week. This is going to be a very telling week. And if not, well, we'll all be depressed for a week. That's how this goes. Welcome to the NFL. It's flying by, Courtney.
I know. I can't believe it. Like that we're at week 8 already.
You know what I said, though? Every other sport has a lull. There is no lull in the NFL.
Yeah, because there's 18 weeks versus like 162
or 82
games.
I think even like when your team is, well, unless your Bears bad or Panthers bad, right? When the Bears were bad, it was different. But like, there's never a point in an NFL season where you go, even if you're like mediocre, where you go, I'm tired of this. You know, in the NBA,
because there's fewer games. Yeah. And every game truly matters, and that's, it feels so different with it for a team that has hope. 8 weeks in, where it isn't like false hope of okay, like they're 3-5 or something after this week. Are they? What are they going to do?
Can you win 2 in a row?
Can you win 2 in a row? How does that affect you at the trade deadline? Like, it's. And even last year, I mean,
at this point, we were 4-4. We were 3-4.
Yeah, because they went 0-4 to start. They won the Washington game, and then at the trade deadline, I think they were 3-5. So
were we 3-5?
It was the Chargers lost.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And that happened 2 days before, but it puts you in a situation where I feel like you can kind of control what your destiny is going to be in terms of adding and in terms of subtracting. Whereas it's like, if you're already having to think about next year at that point, then that's what makes it for a long season. Like, they're locked in on a week-to-week basis of like, no, we feel like we're good right now. Let's capitalize on this moment instead of, okay, how can we set ourselves up for what's next 6, 7, 8 months from now? Like, that's what makes it miserable when you're a fan, thinking about, well, what does the offseason hold as you still have like 11 games you have to play?
Yeah, we literally, like, I think right about that point was the moment where it was like, oh, we might be getting rid of Justin Fields. Like, that was the point where the conversation started, and then the rest of the season, the offseason, and now we're here. Appreciate you guys for tuning in and showing love. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. Thank you to Courtney Cronin, as always, for pulling up on the pod. We'll be back tomorrow, me and Yurko in the studio. I don't even know what to tell you guys to prepare for with that. It's Yurko. You guys know how that goes. As always, man, it's your boy Pat, the designer, back at it again. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Bear down. One love. Peace.